The first thing I noticed wasn't the light coming through the heavy velvet curtains or the sound of the rain hammering against the slate roof of the house I built with my own two hands 40 years ago. It was the taste, a sharp, undeniable tang of copper coating the back of my tongue, like I had been sucking on a fistful of old pennies while I slept. I tried to sit up, but my body refused the command. My limbs felt heavy, packed with wet sand, detached from the brain that was screaming at them to move. That's what I called it in the terrifying privacy of my own thoughts. It wasn't a natural tiredness. It was a suffocating, artificial haze that wrapped around my consciousness like thick wool, muffling the world, muffling me. I lay there, staring at the ceiling plaster, tracing the familiar swirl patterns I had applied myself in 1985. I remembered doing that work. I remembered the smell of the wet plaster, the ache in my shoulders, the pride of building a castle for my wife, Martha, and our little girl, Sarah. That memory was crystal clear, but I couldn't remember how I got to bed last night. I closed my eyes, searching for the bridge between the 6 p.m. news and this moment. There was nothing, just a black gaping hole where my evening should have been. Did I eat dinner? Did I speak to anyone? The terror of it washed over me, colder than the damp morning air. This is how it happens, I thought. This is the dementia. This is the mind rotting from the inside out. I was 72 years old, recovering from a minor stroke, yes, but I had always been sharp. I was a man who could calculate load-bearing ratios in his head. Now, I couldn't remember if I had brushed my teeth. I forced my legs to swing over the edge of the mattress. They trembled, weak and unreliable. I sat there for a moment, breathing through the nausea, waiting for the room to stop tilting. "Get up, Arthur," I whispered to myself. "Do not let them see you weak. Not today." I shuffled out of the bedroom and down the long mahogany-paneled hallway. My left foot dragged slightly, a remnant of the stroke, or so they told me. The house was silent, oppressive. It didn't feel like my home anymore. It felt like a museum where I was the oldest, dustiest exhibit, kept around only because it was too heavy to move. I pushed open the kitchen door. The smell of lemon cleaner hit me instantly, chemical and sharp. Sarah was there, standing at the island, aggressively scrubbing a countertop that was already gleaming. She didn't look up when I entered. She just kept scrubbing, her shoulders hunched, her blonde hair pulled back in a severe, tight ponytail. "Morning, Dad," she said to the granite. Her voice was tight, thin. "Morning, Sarah," I croaked. My voice sounded foreign, gravelly and weak. Derek was sitting at the breakfast table, scrolling through his phone, my son-in-law. The man who had moved into my house 3 years ago to help, but who seemed to have spent the majority of that time drinking my scotch and correcting my grammar. He looked up, his face arranging itself into a mask of exaggerated, pitying kindness. It was a look that made my skin crawl. "Well, look who's up," Derek said. His voice was too loud, too slow, the pitch you use for a toddler or a golden retriever. "Rough night again, Arthur?" I gripped the back of a chair to steady myself. "Shouting," Derek said, shaking his head with a performative sigh. "At the television. Ranting about the government, then about the neighbors. We had to guide you to bed." I stared at him. I searched the black hole in my mind. Nothing. "No," I whispered. "It's okay, Arthur," he said, smiling with his mouth but not his eyes. "That's why we're here." I moved toward the coffee pot. I needed the caffeine to burn away the fog. I needed to feel alert. My hand reached for the carafe. I commanded my fingers to grip the handle, to lift, to pour. It was a simple mechanic, a lever and a fulcrum. But as I lifted the pot, a sudden, violent tremor seized my wrist. It was like an electrical shock bypassing my will. The pot jerked. Hot coffee splashed over the rim, hitting the counter, hitting my hand. I gasped, dropping the pot. It shattered against the granite, sending shards of glass and dark liquid exploding across the pristine kitchen. Sarah jumped back, dropping her sponge. I've got it, I stammered, reaching for a towel, my face burning with a shame so hot it felt like sunburn. No, Arthur, stop, Derek said. He didn't stand up. He just watched me scrabble at the mess with shaking hands. Sarah, get the broom. Don't let him cut himself. Sarah rushed over, gently pushing my hands away. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Why wouldn't she look at me? Was she disgusted, or was she afraid? I'm sorry, I muttered. My hand. It didn't slip, Arthur, Derek said softly. It failed, just like yesterday with the remote. He stood up then, walking over to place a heavy hand on my shoulder. He squeezed, just a fraction too hard. See? This is exactly why we need to revisit the power of attorney conversation, for your own safety. We can't have you hurting yourself. I looked at him. I wanted to tell him to take his hand off me. I wanted to tell him that I built this house, that I laid the foundation he was standing on. But the words died in my throat, choked by the fog. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was dangerous. I truly believed I was losing my mind. I believed the man who built skyscrapers, who commanded crews of 100 men, was crumbling into dust. But if you are out there, if you are listening to the confession of a broken man, listen closely. If you have ever felt your gut scream that the people smiling at you are holding a knife behind their back, do not ignore it. Don't make the mistake I did. Because what I eventually found in the trash can wasn't evidence of my decline. It was a receipt for my own execution. I need some air, I said, pulling away from Derek's grip. Don't go far, Derek warned. I retreated to the back porch. It was my sanctuary, the one place Derek rarely ventured because he hated the humidity. I sat heavily on the teak bench, my chest heaving. Buster, our Rottweiler, thumped his tail against the deck boards. He was 12 years old, his muzzle gray, his hips stiff with arthritis. He was the only living thing in this house that looked at me with genuine love. Hey, buddy, I whispered, reaching down to scratch behind his ears. You and me, huh? Buster groaned in appreciation, leaning his massive head against my knee. I reached into my pocket. I had the midday pill, the heart medication Derek organized for me in those humiliating plastic dispensers. He claimed my hands were too shaky to manage the bottles myself. It was a small, oblong blue pill. I needed to take it. The doctor said it was crucial for my blood pressure. If I didn't take it, the strokes would come back. That's what Derek said. I pinched the pill between my thumb and forefinger, lifting it toward my mouth. A sudden spasm, a twitch of the nerve, and the pill slipped. It bounced off my knee and skittered onto the stone patio. Damn it, I cursed, bending down. Buster was faster. He thought it was a treat. He snapped the blue pill up in a second. No, I lunged for him, trying to pry his jaws open. Drop it, boy. He swallowed, licking his chops, looking at me with innocent brown eyes. I slumped back on the bench, panic rising in my throat. Would it hurt him? It was a blood pressure pill. A low dose, surely. He was a 120-pound animal. One pill meant for a human probably wouldn't kill him. But the guilt gnawed at me. Even in this, I was a failure. I couldn't even take a pill without endangering the dog. I sat there with him, stroking his head, waiting to see if he would get sick. I decided I would stay with him. If he showed any signs of distress, I'd yell for Sarah to take us to the vet. An hour passed. Then two. The sun moved across the porch, casting long shadows through the railing. I looked down at Buster. He hadn't moved in 45 minutes. Usually, he'd be barking at the squirrels chattering in the oak trees. Usually, he'd be nudging my hand for more attention. Buster, I said. He didn't lift his head. I leaned closer, a cold knot of dread tightening in my stomach. His eyes were half open, rolled back so the white showed. A thick rope of drool hung from his jowls, pooling on the deck. His breathing was shallow, ragged. "Buster," I shook him. His body was heavy, dead weight. His limbs twitched sporadically, not like a dog dreaming of chasing rabbits, but like a system misfiring. He was completely limp, catatonic. I stared at the dog. He looked exactly how I felt every morning. The heaviness, the inability to focus, the drooling. The slack-jawed stupor. A cold bolt of clarity, sharper than any knife, pierced through the fog in my brain. I looked at the dog, comatose on the floorboards. I looked at my own trembling hands. "It's not a stroke," I whispered to the empty air. My voice was steady for the first time in months. The realization didn't bring relief. It brought a horror so profound I nearly vomited. They weren't managing my decline. They were manufacturing it. I stood up. I didn't stumble. The adrenaline was a powerful antidote. I went back inside, moving quietly. I told Sarah I was going to rest in the study. She barely nodded, relieved to have me out of her hair. I locked the study door. I paced the room, my mind racing, connecting dots I had been too drugged to see. The missed appointments, the way Derek always intercepted the doctor's calls, the new pharmacy they were using because it was cheaper. I waited until nightfall. I sat in the dark leather chair of my study, listening to the house settle. At 11 p.m., the lights downstairs went out. At 11:30, I heard the heavy thud of their bedroom door closing. I gave them another hour. At 12:30 a.m., I opened the study door. The house was a cavern of shadows. I stepped into the hallway. The floorboards groaned, a sound that usually terrified me, reminding me of my own clumsiness. Tonight, it sounded like the house was conspiring with me. I knew where every squeak was. I stepped on the edges of the boards, near the walls, where the support was strongest. I moved like a ghost. I went to the bathroom cabinet first. Empty. Just aspirin and Band-Aids. Derek had moved the main supply. Of course he had. I crept past the kitchen. The moonlight hit the broken shards of the coffee pot in the trash can. A symbol of my weakness. I would make them eat that glass, metaphorically speaking. He kept it locked. He said he had client files in there, sensitive financial data, for the day trading he pretended to do with Sarah's inheritance. I knew he spent most of his time in there playing video games and drinking cheap beer. I tried the handle. Locked. I knelt down. My hands were shaking, but not from the drugs now. They were shaking from rage. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small tension wrench and pick I had fashioned from a paperclip and a pen cap earlier that evening. It was crude, but I wasn't just an old invalid. I was a contractor. I had installed hundreds of doors. I understood the mechanics of a tumbler lock better than I understood the internet. I inserted the metal. I closed my eyes, visualizing the pins. Click, click. The lock turned. I pushed the door open. The smell hit me instantly. Stale beer, unwashed gym clothes, and the distinct, metallic scent of arrogance. The room was a mess. Monitors hummed in sleep mode. Empty cans littered the desk. I didn't turn on the light. I used the flashlight on my phone, keeping the beam low. I searched the drawers. Top drawer, controllers, cables. Unpaid bills, final notices. Bottom drawer, hidden beneath a stack of gaming magazines. There it was. It wasn't a standard orange prescription bottle. It was a large, white bulk container, the kind you order from dubious overseas pharmacies. The label had been half peeled off, but the text was still legible. I lifted the bottle. It rattled. The sound of a rattlesnake's tail. Inside were hundreds of small, blue oblong pills, identical to the ones he put in my dispenser, identical to the one Buster ate. I brought the bottle into the light. Beside it was a printed invoice, crumpled and stained with coffee rings. Order number 44921. Haloperidol, high dose. Quetiapine. I stared at the words. I knew these names. Not from my own prescriptions, but from a documentary I had watched years ago about mental institutions in the 50s. These were heavy-duty antipsychotics, chemical straitjackets, drugs used to sedate violent schizophrenics, drugs that, if given to a man with a heart condition and a history of stroke, would turn his brain into mush and stop his heart within a year. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. It wasn't weakness, it was a rage so cold it burned. Sarah knew. She had to know. She lived in this house. She saw me fading. She saw me drooling. And she did nothing. She let this stranger, this leech, poison the father who had paid for her college, who had walked her down the aisle, who had built this roof over her head. My hand closed around the bottle. I wanted to smash it. I wanted to run upstairs and scream. But I couldn't. Not yet. If I confronted them now, they would lie. They would say I was confused, that I stole the pills, that I was dangerous. They would have me committed by morning. I needed to be smarter. I needed to be the architect again. I poured a single pill into my palm and wrapped it in a tissue. I shoved it deep into my pajama pocket. Then I put the bottle back exactly where I found it. I locked the drawer. I backed out of the room and relocked the door. I climbed the stairs, my legs burning, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. I went into the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. I looked up into the mirror. The face staring back was gray, lined and tired. The mouth drooped slightly on the left side. It was the face of a victim, the face of a dying man. But then I looked at the eyes. The fog was gone. The dull, glazed look was gone. In its place was a hard, flinty glint of steel. It was the look of a man who had survived Vietnam, who had survived recessions, who had buried a wife and kept standing. They thought I was a confused old man. They thought I was already dead, just waiting to stop breathing. They have no idea I just woke up. The hardest part of war isn't the fighting. It's the waiting in the trench, knowing the enemy is just over the ridge, and having to stay perfectly, deathly still while your instincts scream at you to run. I woke up with the sun, my mind clear for the first time in months, but I knew I couldn't show it. I had to put the mask back on. I had to become the very thing they despised, the thing they were trying to kill, a confused, stumbling, broken old man. I sat on the edge of the bed and practiced the slump of my shoulders. I let my jaw go slack. I rehearsed the vacant stare I had seen in the mirror so many times before, the look of a man whose lights were flickering out. It was a performance, a strategic deception, but it felt like a betrayal of my own dignity. I was a builder. I was a father. Now I was an actor in a tragedy written by my son-in-law. I dragged my left foot as I entered the kitchen. It was a heavy, scraping sound against the hardwood. Scuff, step, scuff, step. The rhythm of decline. Derek was already there, leaning against the counter, sipping an energy drink. He looked up, his eyes scanning me with that predatory assessment I had come to loathe. Sarah was at the stove, pushing eggs around a pan. "Morning, Arthur," Derek said, his voice dripping with that sickening, saccharine volume. I didn't look at him. I focused on a spot on the wall, letting my eyes glaze over. I croaked. The silence in the kitchen was thick enough to choke on. I saw Sarah's back stiffen. Her hand stopped moving the spatula. It felt like swallowing glass to use my late wife's name as a weapon, to cheapen the sacred grief of her passing for a ruse. But I needed to sell this. I needed them to believe I was too far gone to be a threat. Derek exchanged a look with Sarah, a look of greedy satisfaction that made my blood boil. Sarah turned slowly. Her face was pale, tired. "Dad, Mom's gone, remember? I let my head hang low, staring at my trembling hands. Gone? No, she was just here. That's the fog, Dad, Derek said, stepping forward. You're having an episode. It's okay. He pulled the chair out for me. I collapsed into it, letting out a confused, pathetic sigh. Right, right. Here, Derek said. He placed a small plastic cup on the table in front of me. Inside sat the blue pill, the poison. Take your heart meds, Arthur. I looked at the pill. It looked so innocent, just a tiny chemical compound pressed into a shape. It was designed to help hearts, supposedly, but this one was designed to stop them. I picked it up with shaking fingers. Derek watched me like a hawk. I put the pill in my mouth, sliding it deep between my cheek and my gum, a trick I'd seen in a prison movie decades ago and never thought I'd have to use in my own breakfast nook. Drink, Derek commanded, handing me a glass of orange juice. I took a large gulp, swallowing the liquid, but keeping the pill lodged tight. I made a show of swallowing hard, opening my mouth slightly to gasp for air. Good, Derek said, turning back to the fridge. The moment his back was turned, I grabbed my napkin. I pretended to wipe my mouth, spitting the blue death into the paper folds. I crumpled the napkin into a ball and shoved it deep into the pocket of my cardigan. I needed to get out of the house. I needed to verify what I knew, and I couldn't do it here, not with Derek monitoring the Wi-Fi and Sarah hovering like a ghost. I needed an ally. I needed Elias. I want to see her, I said suddenly, raising my voice. Sarah jumped. I slammed my hand on the table. It wasn't a fake tremor this time. It was calculated rage. I want to go to the cemetery. If she's dead, I want to see the stone. You're lying to me. Derek turned around, his face hardening. Arthur, calm down. You are in no condition to leave this house. I shouted, standing up and swaying intentionally. Take me to her. You're not walking anywhere, Derek snapped. I pleaded, turning to my daughter. I put all my fear, all my confusion, all my desperate need into my eyes. Sarah, please, just drive me, please. Sarah looked at me, then at Derek. I saw the conflict in her. She was weak, yes. She was complicit, yes. But she was still my daughter. She still remembered the man who taught her to ride a bike. Derek, maybe it would help, Sarah whispered. If he sees the grave, maybe the episode will stop. Derek rolled his eyes, checking his watch. Fine, but make it quick. I have calls to make. The drive was silent. Sarah gripped the steering wheel like it was a lifeline. I stared out the window, watching the familiar streets of my town pass by. Streets I had paved, buildings I had renovated. I felt like a stranger in my own life. As we approached the turn for the cemetery, I groaned, clutching my throat. Water, Sarah, I need water. Dad, we're almost there, she said, panicked. I need cough drops, I wheezed, the ones from the old shop, on 4th. Please, Sarah. She sighed, a sound of pure exhaustion, and spun the wheel. Okay, Dad, okay. She parked in front of Miller's Pharmacy. It was a relic, one of the few places in town that hadn't been bought out by a chain. It smelled of dust and peppermint and old wood. I'll go in, Sarah said, reaching for her purse. No, I said, unbuckling my seatbelt with fumbling hands. I know which ones, the cherry ones. I need to stretch my legs. Just give me a minute. She looked at me, seeing only a broken old man needing a simple comfort. 5 minutes, Dad. I walked into the shop, the bell above the door chiming a familiar greeting. The air was cool and still. Behind the high counter, squinting at a ledger, was Elias. Elias Vance was a man made of gristle and leather. We had crawled through mud together in '68. We had built half this town together in the '80s. He was 74, retired, but he still owned the building and spent his days organizing records because he didn't know how to stop working. He looked up, his eyes narrowing as he took in my appearance. The cardigan, the shuffle, the gray pallor. "Huh?" he grunted. "I feel worse," I said. My voice dropped the act instantly. I stood up straighter. I walked to the counter with a steady gait. "I don't have much time, Elias." Elias watched the transformation, his eyebrows raising. "Life or death," I said. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the crumpled napkin. I unfolded it, revealing the slightly dissolved blue pill. I placed it on the glass counter between us. "Tell me what this is, Elias." Elias looked at me, then at the pill. He didn't ask questions. He picked up a pair of tweezers from his workspace and lifted the blue oval. He brought it close to his face, sniffing it. Then, to my shock, he touched the very tip of it to his tongue and immediately spat into a trash can. "Bitter," he muttered. He pulled a jeweler's loupe from his pocket and scrutinized the faint, worn markings on the side of the pill. He was silent for a long time. The humming of the refrigerator in the back was the only sound. Finally, he set the loupe down. He looked me dead in the eye. "Arthur," he said, his voice a gravelly whisper. "My son-in-law," I said. Elias let out a low, dark chuckle that had no humor in it. "This isn't for blood pressure. This is a generic, high-dose antipsychotic. Haloperidol mixed with quetiapine. It's a chemical straitjacket." I gripped the edge of the counter. I knew it, but hearing it aloud, confirmed by a man I trusted with my life, felt like a physical blow to the chest. Asked. Elias shook his head slowly. "It would drop your blood pressure through the floor. You'd be dizzy, confused, memory loss. Eventually, your heart would just stop. It would look like natural causes. Attempted murder. Slow, deniable, calculated murder." Arthur asked, his hand hovering over the rotary phone he kept for show. "Not yet," I said. "They want my signature first. They need me to sign over the estate. If I arrest them now, Derek claims it was a mix-up. He claims he got a bad batch from an online pharmacy. He's slippery, Elias. I need to catch him." Elias asked. He was a soldier again, ready for orders. "I need a switch," I said. "I need pills that look exactly like this. Blue, oval, roughly the same size." Elias scanned his shelves. He moved to the back, rummaging through boxes of older stock and veterinary supplies he still carried for the local farmers. "Blue," he muttered. He pulled down a large plastic bottle. He shook it. "Here, glucosamine and chondroitin, joint supplements for large breed dogs." He poured one out next to the poison. It was nearly a perfect match. A shade lighter, perhaps, but in a dim kitchen, to a man who wasn't looking closely, indistinguishable. "Dog meds," Elias chuckled grimly. "It'll do," I said. "Fill a bottle." I walked out of that pharmacy with a bottle of joint supplements hidden in the lining of my coat, and the realization that the war had officially begun. I returned to the car, sucking on a cherry cough drop. "Sorry," I mumbled to Sarah. She didn't look at me. She just drove. That night, the real work began. I lay in bed, fully clothed under the covers, watching the red digits of the alarm clock. 1 a.m., 2 a.m. At 3 a.m., the house was a tomb. I slipped out of bed. I didn't need to feign the shuffle now. I moved with the precision of a man who had laid these floorboards. I ghosted down the stairs, avoiding the third step from the top, which always creaked. I went to the kitchen first. Derek had laid out my weekly dispenser on the counter for the morning. I popped the lid on Tuesday. I took out the poison. I replaced it with a dog pill. Then, the dangerous part. I crept to his office door. I used the tension wrench again. Click. The door swung open. The smell of stale beer was stronger tonight. I went to the bottom drawer. I found a bulk white bottle. My heart was hammering against my ribs, loud enough, I feared, to wake the house. I took the Ziploc bag I had prepared. I poured every single antipsychotic pill into the bag, hundreds of them. Then I took the bottle of dog supplements from my coat. I poured them into Derek's bulk container. They rattled against the plastic, a sound that seemed deafening in the silence. I screwed the cap back on. I took the bag of real poison and taped it securely to the underside of the antique desk in the study, my evidence cache. If anything happened to me, if I died tomorrow, the police would find that bag. I went back to bed, but I didn't sleep. I lay there visualizing the chemistry. The next morning, the sun rose on a different world. I shuffled into the kitchen. Derek was there. Sarah was there. "Pill time," Derek said, tossing the cup at me. I picked it up. I looked at the blue pill. To him, it was a weapon. To me, it was calcium and shark cartilage. I put it in my mouth. I didn't use the cheek trick. I swallowed it whole, washing it down with water. "Good man," Derek smirked. He watched me swallow. He thought he just watched me swallow my sanity. He thought he was erasing me. In reality, I just swallowed a joint supplement for a golden retriever. I feel tired," I mumbled. "Go rest, Arthur," Derek said, dismissing me with a wave of his hand. I retreated to the living room recliner. I closed my eyes, feigning sleep. My breathing evened out. I waited. 20 minutes later, Derek walked into the hallway. He was on his phone. He paused near the entryway, glancing at me. I let my mouth hang open slightly. I let out a soft snore. He chuckled. "Yeah, he's out. Lights out. Listen, the notary is coming Friday." I kept my breathing steady, though my heart lurched. Friday. That was 3 days away. "He's completely gone, man," Derek continued into the phone. "He was asking for his dead wife again this morning. He'll sign whatever I put in front of him. We're listing the house on Monday. I've already got a brochure for the state facility." The timeline had shrunk. I didn't have months to gather evidence. I didn't have weeks to play games. I had 3 days. Friday was the execution date. Derek walked back toward the kitchen, his voice fading. I opened my eyes. I looked at the ceiling. The anger that had been fueling me shifted into something colder, something sharper. Defense wasn't enough. Surviving wasn't enough. If I just refused to sign, they would find another way. They would forge it. They would hurt me. I needed to go on the offensive. I sat up slowly. My gaze drifted to the kitchen counter where Derek kept his own personal pharmacy. Brain boosters. He took 2 every morning with his coffee to stay sharp for his day trading. White capsules. I reached into my pocket and fingered the Ziploc bag of antipsychotics I hadn't stashed yet, the few I had kept for analysis. A dark, terrifying idea formed in the back of my mind. Derek wanted me confused? He wanted me hallucinating? He wanted me pliable and broken? I looked at his jar of focus pills. I looked at the poison in my pocket. "You want to see what crazy looks like, Derek?" I stood up, the ghost of a smile touching my lips for the first time in months. The title promise of this nightmare was about to come true, but not for me. I wasn't just going to survive this week. I was going to make him experience the very hell he designed for me.